Greg Ehrenberg from OddsShopper, and we are here to break down UFC 278 Kamaru Usman versus Leon Edwards with my favorite PrizePicks plays for the slate. So like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Let me know below the comment section. Does anything stand out to you on PrizePicks? What props do you like? What fighters do you like to win? Let me know below in the comment section. Also, if you're signing up at PrizePicks for the first time, make sure to use the promo code AWESEMO because it's going to get you up to a $100 bonus on your first deposit. So if you're starting a new account at PrizePicks, why would you start with no free money when you start with up to $100? It's an easy decision to make. Just make sure to sign up for the first time using that promo code AWESEMO. But now I'm going to get into it. My favorite PrizePicks props for UFC 278. The first prop I'm looking at is over 2.5 takedowns from Merab Dvalishvili going up against Jose Aldo. And this is one of the fights that I'm the most interested in for this card, just because I do think there's a really wide range of outcomes. It's one of the only tightly lined fights, if you guys are just looking at sportsbook odds, where the majority of the fights on this card, there's like a minus 350 favor, minus 400. So a lot of them pretty lopsided, but this is one where it's close to a pick, and Merab the slightest of favorites right now on the betting line. And in general, when he wins, he does it with immense pressure, lots of output, and a lot of takedown attempts. So this is what makes the matchup so interesting to me, because Jose Aldo has historically had some of the best takedown defense in UFC history. He has a 90% takedown defense. And the last time he was, he was taken down once by Rob Font in his last fight. But other than that, there has not been a fight that we have seen Aldo taken down since the Peter Yan fight in July 11th of 2020. So it wasn't taken down against Chito Vera, wasn't taken down against Pedro Munoz. And like I said, overall, 90% takedown defense. But here's the thing when it comes to Merab. He is going to shoot as many takedowns as it takes to get the fight to the mat. He lands 7.3 takedowns per 15 minutes, and he doesn't do it with very high takedown accuracy. He only has a 45% takedown accuracy, so he's averaging right around 15 takedown attempts per fight, and he's also really bad at holding top position. So generally what happens in his fights, Merab is working, gets a takedown, and then the other guy's able to pop back up, and he goes right back to shooting on takedown attempts. He's trying to mix in strikes in between. He's a really good minute winner and a really good round winner for that reason. He's so active, and I do think this fight is most likely to go to decision. And if you look at the fights from Merab over the course of his UFC career, almost always he's landing more than 2.5 takedowns. Last fight was a second round finish over Marlon Moraes. 4 takedowns in that fight. A win over Cody Stamann, 5 takedowns. The only time we've seen him under this mark was in a win over John Dodson. Dodson really quick, really elusive. Merab only took him down 2 times in that fight. Oh, with that said, there's a bunch of trips and mat returns that I think could have been scored as takedowns that ultimately the scorekeeper didn't. But every other fight of Merab's UFC career, he's at least 4 takedowns, and he's had as many as 13 in a win over Gustavo Lopez. Also at a fight where he had 12 in a win over Casey Kenny, and Kenny's a pretty good wrestler. And then he had 11 in what was a fairly controversial split decision loss to Frankie Saenz. I thought that Merab won that fight, but here's ultimately what I'm looking at here. I think Jose Aldo is going to defend the majority of the takedowns that Merab puts out there, but the takedown output is so high for him that I just think at some point he's going to be able to get Jose Aldo down to the ground a few times. I think he's going to wear him down over the course of the fight. I do think Merab is a little more likely to win. Ultimately, I do think he wins on the judges' scorecards. But the real thing I'm looking at here from a PrizePicks perspective, over 2.5 takedowns just because of the wrestling volume that Merab Dvalishvili puts out. For my next prop, I'm looking at the main event and Kamaru Usman, who I consider the #1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world, for over 3.5 takedowns. Now, this is a rematch. We saw Kamaru Usman and Leon Edwards fight way back in the day. This was actually Usman's first fight officially in the UFC, coming off the Ultimate Fighter. And in that fight against Edwards, it was only a 3-round fight, debut. Obviously, he wasn't fighting in main events quite yet. And in that fight, and this was all the way back in 2015, Usman won a decision pretty clearly. I actually did think Edwards won the first round, but I thought Usman pretty clearly won rounds 2 and 3. And Usman landed 6 takedowns in that fight. And one thing that really stood out to me is as the fight wore down, the takedowns came easier and easier for Usman. So in the first round, especially at the start of the round, Edwards was defending well. He was able to fend off Usman's takedown attempts, but as he got more and more tired and Usman continued to bring the pressure, he started to break him down. The takedowns came easier, and that was only in a 3-round fight. If this fight goes to decision, well, what is this going to look like in the 4th and the 5th rounds? And this is a fight that's expected to go to the judges' scorecards. If you look at sportsbooks, it's not like this is one of these main event fights where it's like minus 200. to be under 4.5 rounds or be finishing inside the distance. It's a fight that's probably going to go at least to the 4th or 5th round. And I think Edwards is going to be tired at that point in time based on what we've seen. And another thing to consider also, this fight is taking place at altitude. Salt Lake City, where it's one of the highest altitude cities in the US. So it's a spot where, kind of like if you guys watch the NBA and think about how often teams will get fatigued when they're playing on the tail end of a back-to-back in Utah or tail end of a back-to-back playing in Denver. I do think the altitude could play a role here, and Usman trains at altitude, so it's something that he's used to. But also in terms of the 3.5 takedown prop, I think it's too low. And I think it's based on a lot of the recent results for Usman, where he's generally been under this number. But I think we could look through some of those fights and we could point out why it is that he hasn't landed takedowns in bulk. So first off, his last fight against Colby Covington, 1 takedown officially for Usman in that fight. Colby Covington's an excellent, excellent wrestler. We've now seen Usman and Covington match up twice, and neither one of them really got much wrestling going in either matchup because they knew that it was mostly going to be a waste of energy because both of them were such good wrestlers that there was no real advantage in that department. Then before that, we had the fight against Jorge Masvidal. Well, Usman knocked him out in the 2nd round, something I don't really think he's going to be doing against Leon Edwards. So there was only 2 takedowns because he knocked him out in the 2nd round. There was only 1 round that was completed. Then the fight before that against Gilbert Burns, there was no reason for Usman to attempt takedowns in that fight, mostly because he was in a massive amount of danger if it went to the ground against Gilbert Burns. Burns would have had the potential to submit him off his back, so he didn't even want to wrestle in that matchup. Then you got the matchup before against Jorge Masvidal. That was one that went to decision. He didn't finish him early, and he landed 5 takedowns in that fight. Then the fight before against Colby Covington, once again, same thing with the other Covington matchup where there weren't takedowns attempted. So I look at Usman's last few fights, and I do think there's just reasons that we haven't seen him wrestle as much as we did earlier in his career. And sure, he's improved his striking, but his easiest path to victory against Leon Edwards is going to be with the wrestling in this spot. We've seen them fight once. That was the path Usman took to victory. He's a very smart fighter. I think we're going to see him do it again. So I think this is going to be a fairly similar look to the first time that they fought. I think Usman wins the decision. I think he grinds him out with the wrestling. So I'm looking at Kamaru Usman over 3.5 takedowns in the main event. For my final prop of the card, I'm looking at over 75.5 significant strikes for Sean Woodson. This is a fight that, once again, if you look at the odds and how this fight is being lined at sportsbooks, it's expected to go to decision, like -130, -125, to end up going to the judges' scorecards. And Woodson strikes at a fairly high rate. He lands 5.75 significant strikes per minute. And the same goes for Saldana on the other side, 4.92 significant strikes per minute. So I think this fight is going to take place on the feet. I think it's going to be a fairly high output striking affair. And then if it goes to decision, that's where I think the over 75.5 significant strikes looks good for Sean Woodson. And another thing to consider also, in terms of why I said I think this fight is going to take place on the feet, Woodson has landed 0 takedowns in his UFC career. Saldana lands 0.54 takedowns per 15 minutes. So he does not really look to shoot very many takedowns either. 0.54 per 15 minutes. So basically he lands 1 takedown every other fight. And then also, if he does choose to do that, which based on his career record, he doesn't do it very often, Woodson has an 82% takedown defense. So I do think he's fairly likely to be able to fend off any takedown Saldana throws out. That's why I think this fight ultimately is going to be taking place on the feet. And then also, when you look at Sean Woodson, the output from his other UFC fights, so his last fight was a first-round finish, and he still landed 50 significant strikes. And now, once again, keep in mind, this is a fight expected to go to the judges' scorecard. So 50 significant strikes in 1 round. Then the fight before that was against Yusuf Zalal. That was a lower output fight where there was a lot of wrestling involved, at least from Zalal on the offensive standpoint. But then the fight against Julian Erosa, 106 significant strikes landed for Sean Woodson, and then against Kyle Bochniak, 111 significant strikes. So just looking at this matchup, it taking place on the feet, the output of both fighters, I like over 75.5 significant strikes for Sean Woodson. That's my final prop play of the card. So to recap, the props that I am looking at for this Saturday's UFC card, over on PrizePicks, Merab Dvalishvili over 2.5 takedowns, Kamaru Usman over 3.5 takedowns, and then finally Sean Woodson over 75.5 significant strikes. Those are my favorite props over on PrizePicks. And I should also note there's a couple of different ways that we could play these props on the site. So there's something called the flex play over on PrizePicks, where you only have to hit 2 out of 3 props correctly. And if that happens, you win 1.25x your money. Although still, if you go 3 out of 3, added bonus, you get 2.25x your entry fee. But if you're really confident that you have 3 props that are all going to hit, whether they're mine or other ones you like, that is going to pay out 5x your entry fee with the power play. Also, don't forget when you sign up, use the promo code AWESEMOKE, get up to a $100 bonus on your first deposit. No reason to turn down free money. You want to use that promo code when you sign up. Also, before you leave, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Thank you guys very much for watching. Good luck this weekend and enjoy the card.